Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and once again I'm delighted to be joined by Kevin Graham. Kevin, welcome back.
Good afternoon, everybody.
You have a good night after that yesterday?
Well, went home from here yesterday, done some writing, done a jigsaw, watched some of the American football, the Red Zone on Sky. It was not too bad.
I've been catching up with some of the social media fallout, I would maybe call it, from yesterday. Probably cut it right down the middle. 50% were quite happy with what was being discussed yesterday. Another 50 thought it was appalling that we should discuss changes at Celtic Park, Kevin. So this is a platform for Celtic supporters to come on, sometimes vent, sometimes air their views. If people are obviously getting to the point of, being offensive on a personal level, then I've got absolutely no issue with blocking them. Doesn't matter who they support, because it's unacceptable. And in actual fact, you're wearing a t-shirt, which again was sent in from our friends at Max Colby, who are looking at mental health issues as well as various other addiction issues as well, Kevin. So that's always at the forefront of our minds. So, when it comes to a balanced viewpoint, I've given my view. I stand by it.
There seems to be two distinct camps in this situation, and they're both passionate, and it's great to see the Celtic support have such passion, but it's maybe shown where we are. We're in a strange situation, one that we haven't been in for a while. Is the pressure of the 10 telling? We spoke about Steve McLaren the other week off air, and his quote about the dove. And do you caress the dove, or do you crush the dove? And that's what the two Celtic camps seem to be. There's some of the supporters just want to sit and rub the dove and say everything will be all right, you'll fly again. And there's the other camp who just want to crush it to death.
The issue though is I don't see the reasons behind, when you're looking at last season. Well, it all worked out last season. It doesn't give anybody the divine right for it to work out this season. And all I keep hearing is, but last season this happened, as if there's some God-given right for it to happen again this season. There were so many different aspects to how last season went, Kevin. Celtic's performance, first and foremost, in the second half of the season was the reason that we ended up as champions. We also know that our nearest challengers did fall away, and that was one of the aspects of that. But Celtic won that league fair and square. But it doesn't mean to say that there's going to be a massive turnaround this season. And the reason I've got concerns is that the performances are not there. I'm not seeing enough in the performances, in the tactical changes or lack of during games, in the team lineups. Now, we've got to be as balanced as possible. And Celtic are dealing and carrying a lot of injuries at the moment to key players. Now, Neil Lennon mentioned it the other night. Lawrence Connolly stood up for Neil last Tuesday and mentioned it. How many goals did we have at our disposal that were missing last week? When you're looking at the likes of Jamesy Forrest and Odsonne Edouard. And I think Neil Lennon said there's about 70 goals unavailable to us that you would expect these players normally to be playing, and they're out. We've also got the COVID issues in terms of the illnesses and how Celtic have been hit with that. So that's all taken into consideration. But these performances, with all of the players available, maybe other than Mikey Johnson, still weren't performing. So to hark back to last season and how it was turned around last season is one thing. But to think that the situation is the same now and that everything's going to be all right, for me, you're sleepwalking into an absolute crisis.
Yesterday, at half-time, when we were asked, I says before the game, is this half-time at Rugby Park for Neil Lennon? Just because of the way that the game had built up, the fallout from the Rangers game the previous week, us no having a fabulous showing against Milan, So I was wondering if the pressure was building. And this pressure's been building and building. And it's nearly had a few release valves for it to explode. One of them was Cluj last year. The next one was the 29th of December when we got beat off Rangers at home. Then you had Copenhagen as well. This season you've had Ferencváros, and what seems to have eventually blew the valve is the game last week. So we're going into the game yesterday, and it's probably the most pressurised situation a Celtic manager's been under for 10 years. I'm probably right in saying that. Well, it's my opinion. So that game yesterday at half-time, you're sitting there at that game yesterday at half-time, and I was asked about the 45 minutes thing. I never gave a straight answer because I believe in the higher power of football, where you've got 45 minutes to turn things round. It's only 1-0, we weren't out the game. And I wasn't willing to give up my faith that we couldn't turn round that game. When you look at the second half, let's have a look at it. Individual brilliance almost saved it, almost turned it round. Some of the players stood up and were counted. Did we have enough though? Did we see enough to actually say that's going to continue over the course of the season? We didn't, because the first half was awful, and I'm on record as saying that. The first half was absolutely terrible. The first half was just as bad as the previous week's performance. There was nothing. We were flat. We lacked personality. We lacked emotion. We lacked everything that you would want in a football team. We saw signs of life in the second half. We did. And individual mistakes did cost us. When you look at the individual mistakes, Cham, Duffy, then Callum McGregor, as I says yesterday, Callum McGregor seemed to be caused by blind panic. And why was it blind panic? That we had got to say, it was blind panic because he knew that we weren't seeing out that game. It's criminal that we didn't see out that game. It's criminal that the manager and the coaching staff didn't do nothing to see out that game. Mm-hmm. And that was worrying for me. So for all the small good things we saw in the second half, McGregor stepping up to the plate, Lee Griffiths, we didn't see enough. And at the end of the game, that sucker punch. Now, I spoke to you after this about the sucker punch. I felt nothing. I didn't feel up, didn't feel down, didn't feel angry, didn't feel sad. I felt absolutely nothing. We've just lost a goal in the 92nd minute, in the biggest season I'll probably have in my lifetime, and I felt nothing.
Why? Why is that?
I'm struggling to understand why I felt nothing. I says yesterday, it reminded me of that night I was at New St Mirren Park. I felt nothing walking out the ground that night as well. But at that point, I knew something had to happen. And I'm maybe just getting to this point just now where I'm thinking, what is going to happen? Are we going to go all in with Neil, or are we actually going to make a change? And where has it went wrong? Where has it went wrong this season? Why are the players not playing for Neil Lennon? I said yesterday as well, Neil Lennon has to have a look in that dressing room and see if these lads are still behind him. And I still completely think that. And if he doesn't believe he can turn the boys in the dressing room are not behind him, then he's got to do the decent thing. But we don't know enough of what's going on. The folk that are going to make the changes or going to make the decisions have more information than what we've got. And I don't know if I can trust the people who make the decisions to make the right decision. When you have a look at it, we claim to be a Champions League club, and in the last 10 years, or say 9 years anyway, we've had an open goal at Champions League qualification for the majority of the time. We were going to win the league, no problem. How many times we ended up in the Champions League in the last 9 years? 3 times? That's blown countless of millions of pounds because of a failure of one of the basic key performance indicators, if you want to call it that. How many players, how many wrong players have we signed? How many projects have we wasted millions on?
Oh, there's been
Absolutely
tens of
millions.
millions over the years, over that 10-year period, Kevin, even. Without a doubt, there's been loads of money wasted.
Now, me and you sitting here, we both love Ronnie Dyler. But as Anthony Haggerty says last week, Ronnie Dyler won the lottery. So we're expecting the same people who made the decision to appoint Ronnie Dyler to appoint the next manager to get it right. For whatever we say about Brendan Rodgers, the people in charge at the moment failed to keep an elite manager and have failed to build on what an elite manager put in place. I've got massive sympathy for Neil Lennon now, because I don't reckon he should ever have been in this position.
Well, I would say just the points they're making are all valid, Kevin, and we'll expand on them based on a lot of the comments that are coming through on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. But yesterday, one of the massive criticisms on me, personally, was at half-time to say that Neil Lennon's got 45 minutes to save his job. And I 100% stand behind that. Now, if you go back to the last time Celtic lost 3 games in a row, it was 1994, right? So 26 years ago. And in that time, we've gone through quite a few managers. And all the managers that we've had, there's been 3 who have been relieved of their duties during a season. All right? So we've got managers like Wim Jansen, Joe Venglos, Martin O'Neill, Strachan, Neil Lennon first time round, Ronnie Dyler and Rodgers, who either seen out their tenure to the end of the term or left of their own volition, as is the case with Rodgers. But there's been 3 who have been sacked unceremoniously. The first one was Tommy Burns, following which defeat?
Falkirk in the semi-final.
Falkirk in the semi-final, Falkirk being a lower league club at that time. John Barnes after which defeat? 3-1 Inverness Cally Thistle. Mowbray after which defeat? 4-0 against St Mirren away from home. So for anyone to tell me that after 3 defeats on a bounce, where you've more or less been bounced out of the Europa League, or you've started off with a defeat, you've lost your first Glasgow derby of the season, and then we're trying to claw back a lead at the top of the league against Aberdeen. If we had gone 3 games without a win in a row, that's what you're facing. You're facing the sack. And I'm going on the basis of how Celtic have dealt with managers in the last 26 years, which encapsulates the entire time that those in charge have been at the club and more. You know, that goes beyond the time that they've been at the club. So how do we deal with managers? Well, it's either you get absolutely destroyed from a lower league club or from a club that shouldn't be beating you 4-0. But it's not just the one result, Kevin. So if you look at, for example, the tenure of Barnes, it wasn't one result he was sacked over. I spoke to Barnes at length over 90 minutes. He admitted himself it's because he wasn't getting it right. You look at Mowbray, it wasn't one result. It was the accumulation of the fact that it just wasn't working, even though there had been quite a bit of investment in both of those 2 managers. So if we hadn't won the game yesterday, I stand by the fact that we'd have been getting the ticker tape today saying that Neil Lennon had been relieved of his duties. I was criticised for that. I've sat here on a Celtic State of Mind. We've done the podcast now for 3.5 years, and I've stood up for Neil Lennon since he was appointed. You mentioned it the other day. We done a podcast after he got the job permanently. You seen it as the beginning of the end. I didn't. All season this season, the performances have not been there. I've said that the transfer window is the best transfer window in living memory. You know, you put your neck out, there's my view. That's my view. Why is it my view? Well, I can give you a balanced reason for that. And I've backed Neil Lennon every single step of the way. But now, I cannot see him turning this around. So my view is, even when the players come back from injury, the players come back from illness, is he able to figure out what his best formation is and figure out what his best starting lineup is? Because yesterday, there was nothing but confusion when the team line came out. Confusion in the fact that there was so many players of a similar nature playing in the same position, that they were all in the park at the same time. Confusion that Ajeti's still playing up front on his own. The lone striker position quite clearly doesn't suit him. He was like a fish out of water yesterday, Kevin. He had fewer touches of the ball than anybody else on the park. But when the substitution's made, you don't send out reinforcements, you just replace them. So I'm being critical of the decisions that's been made by the management team. And what people need to realise is that's okay to be critical. Everybody just can't put their fingers in their ears, close their eyes and say, keep the faith. Neil Lennon will turn it around because he turned it around last year. Last week, we spoke about a result from 2012. That doesn't cut the mustard. This is 2020. This is the here and now. This is the Neil Lennon of today, not Mark 1, Mark 2, and not even last season, because it's a different beast that we're looking at this season. Not just him, but the team that he's putting out on the park. So I think I, as a Celtic fan, have every right to be concerned and every right to hear my views. And my views, by the way, were echoed by many, many Celtic fans since yesterday's broadcast, and a lot of people agree with those views. So people who disagree, it's not a case of, I disagree with you, I'm just going to abuse you online. I mean, that's pathetic. That is pathetic. That's not how you deal with it. We're all Celtic supporters, Kevin. And I disagree with you on loads of things when it comes to Celtic. Sometimes live, sometimes out there. That's fine. That's what you do when you go to the game on a supporters bus. Mm-hmm. That's what you do if you have a pint after the game. You disagree, you debate. So there's loads to discuss on today's show. But I stand by my view yesterday. We've got 2 games, one on Thursday and one at the weekend, in 2 different competitions. When we reconvene on the Monday, as we always do, Kevin, potentially we'll be more or less out of the Europa League and possibly out the Scottish Cup, unless Neil Lennon can turn it around. Do you think he can?
It's interesting that you actually keep on saying keep the faith, because that's been used as a phrase to browbeat people over the last 10 days. I would love to be able to keep the faith, and if I could see that you had a chance to turn it round. Now, we spoke about Rugby Park yesterday, and bizarrely enough, the game ends up 3 each, the same as what ended up at Rugby Park. Mm-hmm. Now, that game at Rugby Park we're 3-0 down at half time, and it was a great turnaround. And I spoke about this last week, and what Neil says to them in the changing room at half time was, you need to turn this round or we are getting the sack on the Monday. That's what he says in Rugby Park.
Yeah, he did, aye.
So you look at yesterday, did we get the same sort of bounce that Neil got at Rugby Park? You might have been able to argue it completely and wholly if we had won the game 3-2. You might have been able to go, look, we came back out in that second half, that was fine, that was great. We won 3-2. We actually went behind again. We showed a lot of mentality, a lot of good character, and we got out of that. We've got out of that. There's a wee bit of hope there. But losing that goal in the last minute, and the manner that we lost that goal in the last minute, kind of just sucks that faith. Sucks. For me, it must have just sucked that hope away from me.
It was a stark reminder of where we were.
And I'm going, is this just kicking the can down the road again? Is this just going to happen again?
I think it is, yeah.
Then, as I'm going home last night, I'm starting thinking, well, what's changed for last season? And I understand people going, well, this happened last season, because that's what us football fans do.
But that's romanticism.
It is romanticism, but I'll admit it, I'm sitting here as a football romantic.
But this is the here and now. Last season's gone.
I'm sitting here as a football romantic going, I understand that view, going, this has happened before. And Celtic keep on making the same mistakes, so maybe that's why we've got a more engraved view that history repeats itself. Maybe. I don't know, I can't speak for anybody else. Understand that view. This happened last season, we're just going through a wee bad spell. Understand it completely. So, what has changed for last season? And the big thing it jumps out, the massive thing it jumps out, is Damien Duff's left. And he's been replaced by Gavin Stratton. So, I don't know how it's set up in the training ground. So, Damien Duff was a well-respected coach, seemingly. Great playing career. Played at the highest level. He's left for family reasons to take up a job with the Republic of Ireland. And he's been replaced by Gavin Stratton. The team's a year older. Especially Scott Brown's a year older. And you've got new players that have came into that dressing room. And who are still settling in. Now, there has been quite a big change, and you've spoke about how, we've all spoke about how impressed we have been. But there's guys coming in there that are maybe getting more money than other ones. And I've brung this up before. There could be the new boys coming in that are struggling to settle in, and there's maybe a bit of the green-eyed monster there as well. as you've already says, players want to leave. And that's came from the manager's mouth.
After the Ferencvaros
There's players in that dressing room that don't want to be there.
Two of them who we felt he was referring to or about were Chris Ayer and Ryan Christie, who for me have been our two best players all season.
Correct.
So if they want to leave, they want to leave. They're still performing, Kevin. They're still creating. Chris Ayer was the best, has been our best defender over the piece this season. You know, Shane Duffy was welcomed in like some kind of messiah, and he's failing to impress at this moment in time. Now, we stood up for him before the game, Kevin. We spoke about the length of time he'd been out the game before he came to Celtic, the fact that he's been playing 2-3 games a week. He carried an injury in the Rangers game with regards to his dental issues, removing an abscess, couple of teeth, all that kind of stuff. Shouldn't have played against Rangers, but we were strapped and he had to play. So you can maybe forgive him for that, because, you know, he actually wanted to play even though he wasn't fit to do so, Kevin. But since then, we've seen him shipping goals against AC Milan and now against Aberdeen. If that continues and people keep saying, well, that's not the manager's fault. Yeah, but you know what? I take that on board. We can't go through every single game, Kevin, and say individual errors, because by the end of the season we'll have won nothing. You know, we were one header away from shipping a draw at Livy, against Livy at Celtic Park. That was almost a 3-3 draw, you know, because our defence is really, really slack. So, you know, are we constantly going to say that's an individual error, or are we going to actually shape the team up so that we've got more than two defenders sitting at the back? Because we played with two full-backs who were playing as wing-backs. So Duffy and Ayer were sitting at the back on their own. They got a lot of kind of cover from McGregor, who I thought performed really well. It was a shame that he gave away the penalty, of course it was, but that was through desperation, because he's seen that, you know, if we threw away a 3-2 at that point, that there's going to be massive issues, and there are massive issues. To be accused of mass hysteria in some fields, I think is ridiculous as well. There's no hysteria. If you've got a view on a manager over a whole period of this season, from the first game till now, from Hamilton until now, what I would ask you, if you've got a view on the manager that it's not working, he's brought in new players, Kevin, and I would assume that the players that have been brought in with the knowledge of Neil Lennon. I would assume, right? Then here we go. You tell me to date, the three best performances from Celtic this season. 3. Can you name 3?
This season.
What's the 3 performances that stand out, you think, right, there you go, there's a barometer of the level and the standard of performance that I expect from Celtic. 3. Have we had 3?
Second half against Hibs.
Not 3 games, right, so Hibs.
But I'm only saying the second half against Hibs.
Right.
First game against Hamilton, 5-0. And possibly part of the second half against Motherwell.
Right, Motherwell, Hibs and Hamilton. We've played every club in the league once. We've played numerous games in Europe, and that's the 3 high points of the season. That speaks volumes for me. That's the 3 times that we turned up. It speaks volumes. People think, oh, injury and illness, once all the players come back, everything, you know, it's a magic wand. Who was being criticised after Rugby Park? The guy that's sitting injured at the moment, Julien. Who's been criticised all season? He's looked a shadow of his former self. The striker who's going to come in and save the day, Edward. So these guys weren't performing before, but there's this view that they're going to come back and everything's going to be great. Everything's going to work.
You mentioned Rugby Park there. You still had a bit of hope after Rugby Park. I was in here, we watched that game for Rugby Park, and after that...
There was no knee-jerk, Kev.
There was no knee-jerk. There's still time here. Then you've got the warning side that Tannadice was at the following week when Aieti had to score the late winner. Mm-hmm. Then you've had the 2 late winners at St Johnstone as well. And
St Mirren, you know, barely, fills you with any kind of confidence, did it?
I mean, look, I didn't question the mentality of this side. This side has got individual mentality, and they looked in the mirror. Some of them looked in the mirror yesterday and decided to give it a go. Who
would you pinpoint from yesterday?
From yesterday, Christie, Ayer, McGregor, Griffiths. That would be it.
See, again, that's a concern, isn't it?
Who let him down? Frimpong let him down. Duffy, Cham let him down. Mind you, Tom Rogic scored, set up the 2 goals, but overall he was on the edge of the game.
He was on the cusp of anonymity until he assisted the 2 goals. So he gets pass marks for assisting the 2 goals. But other than that, anonymous.
Neil Lennon showed a lot of faith in Elhousey. A lot of faith. And he seems to be letting him down quite a bit. You look at that, Neil Lennon has shown faith in his players. Some players that a lot of Celtic fans wouldn't give the chance to, but as we've just spoke about, the performances have been poor, and there doesn't seem to be that light at the end of the tunnel. We spoke about at the AC Milan game, and I was like, I didn't see enough, and I didn't see enough yesterday to give me any massive inclination that it's going to get turned round very, very quickly with the players coming back. There just seems to be too many issues, and the fact is and it's the lack of. Look at the game against Rangers in the first half yesterday. And even the second half yesterday. The first half yesterday in the game against Rangers were absolutely horrendous. We were terrible. We lacked everything. The second half yesterday, it was individuals that pulled us out of the mire. Mm-hmm. Our individual brilliance, our individual talent that pulled us out of the mire. And nearly got us away with it. We nearly got away with it. The manager just can't keep on relying. Any coaching staff, any football club, can't just keep on relying on individual brilliance. There's some point where your team has got to be more than the sum of its parts and work as a team. And yes. that doesn't seem to be there. And as I says right at the start of this broadcast, that we didn't see out that game is the major, major worry. No, that we got ourselves back into it, that was great. That we didn't see the game out.
See at 3-2, Kev. At 3-2, when we've been pulled back, through individual brilliance, as you've said. At that point, that's where you're looking at the manager to see the game through. It's game management. So you've got players on there who, as individuals and collectively, are experienced. And I think during the week, Neil Lennon said they've won 11 trophies on the bounce. That's no bad, is it? Yeah, that's great. But in order to continue that running sequence, things need to change. This is the whole point. Because we're in a situation at the moment where you're looking at the team, they look sluggish to me, lethargic, and for me, I think Lennon has shown an ineptitude with tactics. So we go to 3-2. You need to win that game yesterday, you really do, and no changes are made. And I'm talking about shape to just see that game through, and then. At the end, when we lose that penalty, it's desperation, Kevin. Mm-hmm. Desperation, because Callum McGregor knows what this means, and he knows that there is no way Rangers are going to lose any points at home later on that afternoon. So, yeah, individual errors, you can continually blame that, you can continually blame injury, you can continually blame illness. So here's the thing. When these players come back, and like I say, they've been there, and the performances weren't any better, and this continues. What then? Because by that point, we'll have played a couple of games in Europe, the Europa League. We'll have played our game in the Scottish Cup, and we'll have played some more games in the league. What then? If the players come back and nothing changes, these concerns we have with the performances continue.
The concerns with the performances will continue if that happens, if what you say does happen. You mentioned earlier on the tipping points for Barnes and Mowbray. It's very hard at this moment in time to say the tipping point for Neil Lennon, with a lot of the support, wasn't last week. Wasn't get that meek defeat to Rangers. Mm-hmm. That seemed to be the tipping point for a lot of people, and a lot of goodwill vanished at that point. And the goodwill was always on very thin ice. If you look at the picture overall, those in charge of the club haven't built, as I says, haven't built on what an elite manager put in place there. And if they couldn't predict that happening when they appointed Neil Lennon, then I don't fear, I suspect that Lennon is going to be around for a wee while longer to be given a chance to sort it out, because if he doesn't, it means if they pull the trigger quickly, it means that they've got it wrong again. So at this precise moment in time, I'm sitting here thinking we've got Lennon for this week.
Another 2 games.
Because the board won't want to admit maybe that they've made a mistake.
So you're going back to when Neil Lennon was given the job permanently? Mm-hmm. Because the argument against that, Kevin, would be he was a success last season. He won the league. He won 9 in a row. Potentially still a treble winner this season should we progress against Aberdeen, etc. So would it be viewed that they got it wrong, or that after a season Neil Lennon got it wrong?
You look at the culture change in that club.
Culture
change in that club that Brendan Rodgers brought in. If it's gradually been getting whittled away, you can have a season of success because you've still got the majority of the players there who will.
They're working in the same way.
They're still working in the same way. Yeah. If that's getting whittled away, gradually chipped away at, then eventually it's going to topple over. It's like a wall. It's going to topple over. Is that where we are? Is it where we are?
Personally, I think it is. Yes, I do.
So whose fault's that? Whose fault is it for appointing a manager who has never embraced the culture that an elite manager's brought in?
Well, that should have been addressed before now, if that is the case, Kevin. If that's the case, then it needs to be addressed before now, before the problem gets to a stage where we're 6 points behind in the league. Asterix, yes, I know that we've got a game in hand, right? 6 points behind in the league, out of the Champions League. You know, unrest in the camp. Let's have a wee chat about that. A lot of questions coming in. What did you mean? What did you mean by that? You know something we don't know. Forget all the rumours. Forget all of that. Let's look at the confirmed unrest in the camp. The confirmed behind the scenes issues that everybody knows about. Right? So you've got a player who is undermining the club, Kevin, and undermining the manager, who has already stipulated what the regulations are in terms of players and the expectations around COVID, who jumps on a plane and goes to Spain. So does that undermine the manager, Kevin, in your opinion?
Of course it does.
Right. Leaks of the team. People coming to me saying, well, it's happened before Lennon was here. Well, it's happened right now. It's happening under Neil Lennon's watch and under his nose. So we can't just say, oh, that's not Neil Lennon's problem. It is Neil Lennon's problem. And again, he's been undermined by people leaking the team. Players who don't want to be here. That came directly from Neil Lennon after the Ferencvaros defeat. There are players who don't want to be here, who've been agitating for moves. These are issues that are confirmed. So nobody is claiming I'm in the know, or I'm getting a group message on WhatsApp, or I'm getting a text from someone who's in the know. Because if that was the case, I wouldn't build any argument on that. These are the confirmed cases of behind the scenes turmoil. So that's happening as we speak, Kevin, and people seem to want to ignore that that's all happening, because when the players who are on the injury list come back, it's a magic wand and everything becomes great again. Doesn't it really work like that? Because if there is a toxic culture within a club, the players' performances are going to be affected. And that's why I'm pushing for change. Personally, that's what I want as a Celtic supporter.
We all want the best. We all want the best for Celtic Football Club. And this is the reason that everybody's so passionate and so blinkered in whatever camp that you're actually in. And you've got to have a look at the bigger picture. And as I says, my bigger picture goes back to the appointment of Neil Lennon and how the people who appointed Neil Lennon couldn't see this day coming.
What if, Kev, if you look at the period between him being appointed to now, has it been a success?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can go back to that, but I much prefer to live in the here and now. So that's been done, and he was a success last season, and Celtic were successful. Will that success continue if we just continue as we are just now, as a lot of Celtic fans are suggesting?
Will it continue? It could.
Scott Brown was dropped for the game yesterday.
It could get
the captain.
Because of the individual brilliance that we've got, it could get you over the line. It could. But long term, it will get you. We're already going downhill. We are already on that slippery slope. Maybe at the moment, the the bogey's only got 3 wheels. We've got one wheel left, and we're still going down that hill. And that one wheel, that one wheel is the quality of the squad. But as the days and the weeks go by, you're seeing the eroding of what Brendan Rodgers put into that football club disappearing.
Yep. I've got a couple of questions on that, because another thing, as well as harking back to what happened last season, as if, it's just going to happen again, is I keep hearing, but, the Challengers, Rangers, they're going to have injuries. Right, okay. If and when that happens, that's a thing. But at the moment, it's just, an expectation. It's an expectation at this moment in time.
This is not us saying this, and this is not us saying this for effect. This is us. What I'm going to say is based on information with guys who work in football. Rangers and Michael Beale have one of the best tacticians in Scotland, and coach in British and European football. They have got a guy that's on a different level to anybody within that Celtic changing room. Anybody that's in the Celtic management team.
And by the way, I know that they're getting the maximum out of their pool. I know that.
Definitely.
Right, I know that if you were to compare player for player, squad for squad, I would pick Celtic every single time. This is part of the frustration, Kevin. But they're getting a much better tune out of that squad at Ibrox than Celtic are currently under Neil Lennon from the squad we've got.
Let's have a look at this, Paul. And I'm not going to go off kilter by saying this. Celtic asked Chris Davis to stay when Rodgers left, because they knew the value of Chris Davis as a coach and a tactician.
Let's talk about the coaching staff then. Do you think it's fragmented? I mentioned this before yesterday's game. I look at the coaching staff, and I do like the idea of the coaching staff. When you think of all the successful teams in the past, Kevin, they're like a gang in themselves. There's things that they know work for each of the individuals, but collectively, Kevin, they've all got a role and it works. Some of them, like Martin O'Neill, didn't spend much time on the training pitch, but he didn't have to, because he was still the manager and he could trust Wally and John Robertson, right? Are we getting that same vibe now from the coaching team? Neil Lennon, John Kennedy, Gavin Strachan, are you getting that vibe from them?
I'm not, but then it's extremely difficult to actually see the vibe because you're not at the games.
That's another thing.
That's usually you would sometimes my mind would wander when I'm sitting at Celtic Park, and I would have a look at the dugout and see the body language and see what's going on. And I remember the most famous goal that Tom Rogic scored for us. You look at the celebrations when everybody's gone mental. Kevin Miles is jumping on
Sinclair,
jumping on Rogic and Sinclair and all of that. Chris Davis is down at Brendan Rodgers telling him what to do. Chris Davis is down there thinking about the tactical change to see the game out. It's no calm down, which I've seen a couple of times. Calm down, keep the heat. Chris Davis was there telling Rodgers, we need to do this to see this game out. To see
the game out, yeah.
I don't see that in the Celtic dugout. I don't see that in the coaching staff. I didn't feel Damien Duff leaving was a big thing, and it might not be a big thing. I might just be looking too much into it. But he's the biggest miss. He's the biggest miss for the club in the summer. He's one that you're looking at. Right, what's changed in the management team? And it's Damien Duff not being there.
And we know that was for personal reasons, because again, people have started looking at why did Foster not come back as well? Was that the first sign that there was going to be issues? And again, you can strip it away, Kevin, and you can look very closely at every single possible issue.
But you drive yourself daft.
Yes, and many are. But my concern there is we don't have that now. There's various reasons for it. It's not as though they can get close and tight in that dugout at the moment because of the restrictions. We know that. But again, it does appear as though there's a bit of disconnect. There appears to be a bit of a disconnect there. There needs to be more in the way of communication, particularly between Kennedy and Neil Lennon. You're looking at some of the things I was reading last night was, but we only zoom in when he's looking grumpy or when he's got his hands full. All right, so Premier Sports, Sky Sports, BT Sports, St Mirren and Ross County all got together and decided we're going to paint a picture of Neil Lennon, so only zoom in when he's looking cheesed off. I don't think so. I really don't. I mean, he's not animated enough in terms of trying to influence what's in front of him. And you do that. You can still do that on the sidelines, Kevin. You can still do it within your technical area. He's not animated enough. There's not enough communication between the coaching staff.
He didn't want him to put in the Lucasade bottles and all of that.
There's a balance.
There is a balance, and I sometimes think that a lot's made of managers who gesticulate and go mental in the technical area, as it's shown that they care. But Brendan Rodgers never done that. Chris Davis didn't done that, but they were very, very good at their job. Yeah,
but they still put the point across, which, it doesn't have to be gesticulating.
There is a story, and again, we didn't want to speak about Lenny Mark 1, Neil Lennon Mark 1, but there is a story when he first got the job that John Robertson came up. Mm-hmm. Now remember, he went through a wee sticky spell when he first got the job.
Yep.
And he invited John Robertson up for a couple of weeks to say, go and you just hang about and see what we can change, what we can do. And John Robertson told him to shut up, that he was talking too much, that the players were going to eventually ignore his voice because he just spoke constantly, barked instructions constantly at them. And what John Robertson seemingly says to him was, when you talk, they've got to listen. If you're constantly talking, they're going to switch off. And thinking of that now, you look at that backroom team, right? They should only hear, for me, what Robertson was saying there, is your backroom team should be able to go out and give instructions. But when your manager comes out and gives instructions, that's when the players should really be switched on, when they hear his voice.
I get that. But to convey a message, Kevin, to convey a message, it's not being conveyed. We spoke about the various points of the game yesterday where a message had to be conveyed because changes had to be made in terms of the shape, either to get back into the game when you're 1-0 down or 2-1 down, or to hold on to a lead at 3-2. It didn't happen, and I think that's the frustration, is we're not reacting quickly enough to what's happening in front of us. There's not a captain on the park at that point, and I know McGregor had the captain's armband, but your leader that's led us through the 9 in a row isn't on the park at that time, so you're looking perhaps for a message to be conveyed. This isn't working, Gaffer. What's happening? But we just continually, in many ways, dig the heels in. It'll continue to work. If it's not working, Kevin, you change it. You've got to change it, because this season of all seasons, I keep hearing all the old cliches, the leagues aren't won in October.
They're not.
I know, but leads can be built up in October, in November and December, and if you don't turn it round, it becomes an issue. Every point, you could look at every point that you drop as being pivotal. I mean, we were talking a couple of weeks ago about, the game where Gordon Marshall played for Kilmarnock. Mm-hmm. We lost the league on the last day. And we try and blame Gordon Marshall for that. We try and blame the performance of Dunfermline on it. You look at some of the points we dropped in the month leading up to that game. You look at the fact that we lost a goal in the last minute to Dundee when we beat them 6-2. Was it Lee Mayer? Scored a last minute goal for Dundee.
Was I?
So you can lose a league by a goal, Kevin. This is how tight this might be. We could lose a league by a goal. And this is why it's so important. But it's not one result. So I think people can't get me wrong on that. It's not one result I'm focusing on. We've only been beat once in a calendar year. Yeah, but for months of that calendar year we weren't playing. It's not one result. It's the whole set of circumstances leading up to that Glasgow Derby defeat.
I think what's ripped a lot of the hope out of me and a lot of the faith out of me is I can see the fact that what Rodgers brought us is no longer there. And I'm going to keep going back to that, because for me that is the biggest issue. That is the biggest issue. There's been an eroding of the culture that Brendan Rodgers brought in, and it's extremely noticeable in the way that we play, the way that we stay up, the lack of fitness, the whole squad, the lack of fitness. How long does it take players to get fit? The lack of professionalism, i.e. ball and golly. Would that have happened under Rodgers?
Something else I would need to throw in there is obviously the Griffiths situation, which again is a behind the scenes issue beyond a normal injury. The situation where he's not fit until the St Johnstone game to get a jersey. You know, that's an issue. That's a behind-the-scenes issue. That's something where if a player comes back unfit, which happens in football terms, you get them fit within a couple of weeks and they're back into the swing of things. That's another issue. Along with ball and goalie, along with the league teams, and along with players apparently agitating for moves. Everything
seemed to be on point. When we were behaving like an elite club on the football side, everything seemed to be on point. Right, we can argue about the transfers until we're blue in the face. But on the pitch, everything was on point, and at the training ground, everything was on point for being an elite level football club.
Right.
Can you actually see that now?
No, but when you try and suggest that, like yesterday when you says to me, right, if you leave Neil Lennon in his duties, who do you bring in? If you try and suggest an elite manager, Celtic fans mock you. So do we want that, or do we think that's a step too far? Should we not be aiming for the top best manager we can get at this football club? Martinez, what's his salary? 5 million a year. What's Neil Lennon's 2.5 million? You know, that's an investment that if you've got a team of players that you're signing from elite clubs, i.e. PSG and Man City, you've got an elite manager there, you're going to get the best out of them.
These players are coming from an elite setup. They're coming from Man City, they're coming from PSG.
Yeah.
If they have went in the huff, it could be because they think that they're not getting developed. They're having a look at what's happening round about them. Now, we're not saying that is happening. Well, I'm not saying that is happening, but to my untrained eye, it looks like it's happening. And to my strange way my brain works, that's not solely down to Lennon. That's not solely down to Neil Lennon. That is also majorly down to the people who appointed Neil Lennon. Someday, this is going to sound really, this is going to come out wrong, but I'm going to say it. Once you've tasted Brendan Rodgers, you shouldn't have went back down. You should have realised that's what Celtic Football Club needed, a manager of that elite stature.
I think they do realise it. And this is what I was saying yesterday. I think that the plan was always get over the line, Kevin. 10 in a row. Get over the line, and then we can revisit that.
Well, I think
that was always the plan, but the plan's not working.
I think that's a wrong decision to start off with.
We thought we could throw quite a bit of investment into the last transfer window and it would see us over the line. That's my belief. And we've gone out and we've bought players, and we've brought players in from the English Premier League. You know, we've brought in some of Scotland's most exciting talent, not playing them. We've brought in a £4.5 million goalkeeper. So the investment was there just to get us over, like, because I mean, you look at that squad, it's brimming with talent, Kevin. Brimming with international players, which is one of the issues with regards to the illnesses that we have at the moment. We've got so many players out in international duty. So I think, Neil Lennon, I don't think he's an elite manager. I don't think that for a minute, and I don't think the board think that. But if they have got the players there, the personnel, the strong enough squad, we can get through this season of all seasons, and then we might have to look at a more long-term kind of plan. That I always think that was the view from those in charge, but the plan's not working.
If they believed that Neil Lennon wasn't an elite level manager, then they should walk out the door after him.
But then the circumstances around him getting the job at that time were such that when Brendan Rodgers left the building, we needed somebody in who was a different type of manager at that stage. What was the reason that we went on to win a treble that season?
Neil Lennon.
Was it an injection of what Neil Lennon brought to the party? It was.
And I'm not going to go back and say, I'm not going to go back. You can listen back to all the last podcasts. The night Neil Lennon, Tynecastle first game, I says, Neil for the short term, somebody else for the long term. They will get us over the line.
But I think that the board's short term is the interim period, 9 in a row and 10 in a row. I think that's their short term. And then the following term is the bigger plan. And by that time, I actually think we do need to think bigger.
Well, I shouldn't really be surprised when you see the litany of failures that this board have had, that they thought they could get away with that.
But I believe that was the plan. But the plan's not working, and that's why, not just yesterday, not hysteria, as some have described, not a knee-jerk. At no point up until yesterday did I suggest for a second that any change would be good. But, weeks and weeks ago I started thinking about it, particularly after the Ferencvaros game, Kevin. You go into 2 games against Riga and Sarajevo, far from convincing wins You know, we scraped through these 2 games into the Europa League groups. You look at the 3 games, glamour ties in many ways, tough group. But, you know, I'm looking at Thursday night and I'm asking myself, can the manager and the coaching team, because it should be a team, and I hope it is a team, can they do enough to turn this round on Thursday? Because they couldn't do enough yesterday. And they couldn't do enough last Thursday.
I don't think, as I say, if the board are not going to pull the trigger because that'd be them admitting a mistake. What am I going to say is they have a duty to protect Neil Lennon. Whatever their decision is, their decision has to be the best for Neil Lennon. Either way.
Yeah.
First and foremost, they've got to look after an employee that they've put in that position.
Shall we have a look at some of the comments coming in on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube?
Let's go.
I was scared to look at social media last night. Anyway, caught up this morning. Stephen Forbes, you're commenting on YouTube. Responses to making managerial changes, that the grass isn't always greener, have merit, but we need proactive leadership and forward thinking. Make changes before we limp into the wrong side of history. Stephen goes on to say, as Kevin said yesterday, the feeling was of acceptance when it went to 3-3. You said it again today, Kev. Mm-hmm. In another season, 6 points adrift with a game in hand may not justify a change, but it's for 10 and performances have been abysmal. Again, I was criticised for mentioning how horrendous I felt the performances have been for the best part of this season, Kevin. Now, normally when somebody gets a text, I get a bit worried because they might be getting... All right. There's no team lines to leak, which is great. I wanted, before going back to the comments coming in, I wanted to speak a wee bit about Scott Brown. He was dropped yesterday. We don't know the reasons why. Was it down to performance? Was it down to resting him? Do you think that you can go to Pittodrie and rest Scott Brown? I spoke to Jim Orr on Friday about it. I asked him if it was a possibility. He says no danger. You don't go to Pittodrie and drop Scott Brown. Jim knows a thing or two about football. I had Scott Brown in my team, yet he was dropped. What's your thoughts?
I had Scott Brown in my team, and with people who... This is a strange argument. This is an argument where, again, you can sit on either side of the fence, because I don't think there's been a definitive answer any time Scott Brown hasn't played. Did we do well in the first half yesterday without Scott Brown? No. Did we play well without Scott Brown for the first 15 minutes of that second half? Aye, well, we got ourselves back into the game. We did. We looked like we had a bit of energy. Did Scott Brown play a pivotal part in us going in front of that game? I don't think he did. I think it was more the creative players in front of him, which I might be wrong there. Somebody might actually prove me wrong there. I don't think he did. But I don't think there's a definitive answer. And I've said before, the conundrum of Scott Brown is very, very complicated, because he is more than a player to that team. Mm-hmm. And that's worrying as well. That's worrying as well, that is there such weak characters in that dressing room that they can't carry the team without Scott Brown being there. Is that not down to the coaching staff as well? The coaching staff have got to give the players confidence to go out and go, look, right, Scott Brown is instrumental. He's like a scaffolding pole to that team. Probably the thing that holds it all together. But he's now 35.
Well,
he's
we
not
need
going to be there forever.
No, we needed him against St Johnstone.
This is what Duffy's let us do.
I was looking for a leader in Duffy, Kevin, I've got to say. I was looking for a leader. And he's made a lot of individual errors. And again, there's no knee-jerk reaction from me. There's no hysteria from me. I think, Shane Duffy, I look at the reasons that Lenny's given. He never played a lot of games for months leading up to his move to Celtic. And since then, he's perhaps struggled with the 2 or 3 games a week of competitive football, including quite a bit of travel with the international squad. So you're looking always for reasons for balance, Kevin. You're not just jumping on it and saying, what a waste of money, didn't play him. And we don't actually have that luxury just now at the moment. In any case, Patrick Murphy, YouTube, thanks for commenting, Patrick. And everybody that's tuning in on YouTube, there was a hell of a lot of people tuning in yesterday. Remember to subscribe. Everything we do is free of charge. Just a wee reminder for some of the other detractors out there as well. But my only defence for Lennon at the moment is the amount of players we have out. Once they all come back, I definitely think we'll look much more solid. Others not in form, El Yunusi Duffy, should make way. But there's a strange thing. Julien comes back in, and let's hope that happens sooner rather than later. What centre half would you drop?
It's got to be Duffy.
It's got to be Duffy based on performances. And that was the partnership, Julien and Ayer, that was under scrutiny after the Kilmarnock game to such a degree. It was actually Ayer that got dropped, wasn't it?
But then do you drop your your highest profile signing of the transfer window? Highest paid player at the club? If
you can drop your captain, I think you can drop the Shane Duffy as well. Mm-hmm. Loads of great points coming in, and we try and get as much balance as possible. Mr. Briggs, again, commenting on YouTube, alarming the amount of fans on social media who keep saying, when we win our game in hand, it's only 3 points. Said game in hand isn't getting played until at least January 2021.
I know.
So it's an interesting point also.
I always remember, you were there that night, Paul Gordon Stratton, when he's speaking about winning the league at Tannadice. He says, we were glad to have the points in the bag rather than the games to play, because it put more pressure on that Rangers team to try and catch them up, and there was pressure on every game that they played because they were playing catch up. So I would rather have that point in the bag, the points in the bag, rather have played that game.
Well, you've got to get the points in the bag, and this is the thing, we're 6 points behind, we're chasing the league leaders, and it's as hard as it is for people to realise that that's where we are at this moment in time. Today someone commented, yes, Rodgers, we lost under Rodgers 4 games before Christmas, but we didn't see the season out with him. There was an injection, there was a change made, and then they start splitting hairs. We didn't sack. I know we didn't sack Rodgers. I know he walked of his own volition. The club knew it was coming, Kevin. Mm-hmm. The club knew it was coming. Leicester had his suit tailored for him. We had a new manager lined up. It was happening, and that season needed change as well. As great as Rodgers was, as brilliant as all the elite aspects of the club were, that season, based on, you go back to the interviews given quite early on in the season by Brendan Rodgers in regards to Terminado, talking about ambition, talking about failing to get the players that he is telling the board to go and get. If that had continued, that would have, potentially limped on into some of the issues that we later saw with some of the players who previously had been absolute stars for Celtic.
But then I'm going to devil's advocate here. The board got him to sign a 4-year contract, which would have took him to the end of this season. It would be the end of this season. They should have made sure that they'd done everything to make sure that he's seen out the contract. So that's a failure on their part as well.
But then, with regards to that, Kev, I think there's an argument to say that if someone's checked out, and they're not putting in the same. Now, I'll give you a scenario. So there's a situation where they have a scouting meeting, let's say, and I don't know how often that is. So let's say it's a fortnightly scouting meeting, and the scouts will bring a number of different targets within the ballpark in terms of finance, transfer fees, wages, because that's what they're working to a structure, aren't they? And we need left backs, and we need maybe a right winger, whatever it might be. And these players are being presented. And in the past, Rodgers would engage with the scouts who are given these reports and ask for further reports, etc. And that is a scenario for a long period of time until Brendan Rodgers checks out, and those meetings end within 5 minutes, and Rodgers doesn't engage, and Rodgers barely even looks at the players' names that are on the sheet. That's what happened at Celtic Park. He checked out. So would you keep him in that frame of mind for longer? And then obviously that sets in.
Why did he check out? Did he check out because he didn't get the signings that he wanted, or did he check out because he knew the Leicester job was coming up?
Bit of both.
If there's a bit of both there. If he's checked out because he hasn't got the signings that he's wanted, then that solely lands on the table of the board.
It depends on what they've agreed when he took the job, Kev, in terms of the budget.
Aye, but then he's went from a 1-year rolling contract to a 4-year contract. Mm-hmm. Surely there would have been a discussion in that 4-year contract of the 4-year plan. Here's
another one then. Here's another thing to consider. So you're after a group of players and you push the boat out to push that budget to the 9 million for Edouard, because that's what we did at that time, right? So the ballpark figure, you're signing players around the same kind of, you're looking at Sinclair was fairly expensive for a Celtic signing, but actually it probably cost about the same as Klamala if you want to compare it. But we pushed the boat out to bring in Edouard. So your ballpark is probably up to £6 million, including wages, but then we push it out for Edouard. What if the only players that are being presented to the Celtic board are in the £11 and £12 million mark, i.e. Castagne? What happens then? So you've pushed the boundaries further than was agreed. And that's a situation that was beginning to happen with Brendan Rodgers. You create a problem.
Was it a situation?
It gives you a reason to then look for your move.
I'm not here to defend Brendan Rodgers because he also failed. He got us 2 years into the Champions League, got some hidings in Europe.
I know he did.
But elite managers have also got a shelf life, but there's always should be followed by another elite manager. What you're actually saying, I don't think John McGinn was out with a price range, but we know for a fact that John McGinn was never going to come to us, and that was just Rod Petrie under no circumstances whatsoever was going to sell John McGinn to Celtic. Castagne, I think it was 8 million at that point, and Rodgers eventually signed him for 20 odd million for Leicester. I understand where you're coming from. If he's checked out, he's checked out. Elite managers will use Celtic as a stepping stone, just the way that we sell Celtic as a stepping stone for players, and that probably causes hassle, and that's probably caused hassle in the dressing room this year with a number of players who are, to use your phrase, have checked out, and there could be a few of them there that have already checked out.
Well, a couple of them that we thought were being referred to after Ferencváros have been our star men this season, Kev. You know, Chris Aya with the speculation around AC Milan, which was confirmed by Maldini. And then Ryan Christie, who he's admitted he's not signed a contract yet. These two guys have been more creative and more productive than virtually every other member of the Celtic squad. Now, Jungle Lion, welcome to the show. And you're commenting on Twitter, Brown ain't the problem this season. I'd agree with that. I don't think Scott Brown's a problem this season either.
I thought he was an easy target, and I thought it was an easy target for people to say he's the cause of all the problems.
Is there? I mean, here's another thing we're talking about, and you put me on the spot and said, who do you bring in? Well, I picked the elite management dream team that I would like at Celtic Park, because I think there's always issues with short-term managerial appointments, Kevin, isn't there? So yeah, criticise me all you like. I might come back to that and it might become a positive meme in the future. Let's hope it does. Scott Brown, can we utilise him differently in that respect? Let's say, you know, there's sometimes a bit of backup needed. I think Neil Lennon, right, I'm not his biggest enemy. I've stood up for him, Kevin, for years and years, but let's say it's not going to happen. Let's say it isn't going to happen. Does he need a bit of backup? Is that not where you then start to look at what we've already got in terms of, you've got a guy in Scott Brown who obviously has been moving into the coaching kind of side of things. I'm not saying that he retires. You also look into our coaching staff that we've already got. I mentioned Sean Maloney, who, you know, he learnt his trade at Celtic Park in terms of coaching. We've got a few others in the background staff. You've been impressed with some yourself. Can we not try and resolve it from within, or is it too far gone? Even on an interim basis?
Maybe on an interim basis, different voices, different training methods may give it the boost. With Brown, you would hope Brown had the ear of the squad. And if Lenny needs backup from his captain, then if Neil Lennon needs backup from his captain, you would hope Scott Brown would give it and corral the players into backing the manager as well. Does that seem to be the case? I don't know. It doesn't seem to be the case. With being an outsider looking in, it just seems to be... It was very simple for all the Celtic fans to blame Scott Brown for all of the problems, but it's a very, very complicated issue, and I think it's been an issue that has been eaten away since Rodgers walked out the door.
Well, Kevin, we said yesterday some bold statements, I would say, most of them by me, and at this moment in time, no one has said anything to change my mind. You know, no one has proved me to be incorrect in any of the views that I gave yesterday, and I take on board the injuries, I take on board the illnesses.
They're all valid. They are all valid reasons.
Yes, of course they are. They are, as are the behind the scenes issues, and it's not an in the know statement. These are things that everybody knows about. Lee Griffiths wasn't fit. That's an individual issue that needs to be dealt with. Bolingoli done what he done. The team is being leaked. There's players that want to leave. These are issues above and beyond the performances that undoubtedly are affecting the performances and the morale within Celtic Football Club. Kevin, it's been a pleasure speaking to you today. And we will come back on later on this afternoon for another wee bulletin, because we're a gluttony for punishment. But in all seriousness, we love everybody getting involved on Twitter, Facebook and on YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe on YouTube. It's all free. And we will be back to you very soon with another instalment of A Celtic State of Mind. All that's left for me to say just now, Kevin, is thank you again for joining me.
Thank you very much.